After being nearly attacked by everyone in my life who has seen this show, and after somehow managing to avoid it at all cost, 3 years later, I finally started watching Severance. It's pretty good, okay? Fine, I'm sorry. But like I had said, the internet has not stopped talking about this show, especially on YouTube, with theories, analysis, and reviews just completely dissecting every aspect. So today I want to do something a little different because I do have some thoughts I want to share, but I don't want to beat a dead horse. I recently found this 2-part video series by a very underrated YouTuber, Chase Bridges, shout out to him, where he tries to solve the Twin Peaks mystery by predicting who killed Laura Palmer as he watches it for the first time. And I just thought that concept was so cool and interesting as someone who is a huge fan of that show, and I thought I could do something similar for Severance considering most of the people who watch this video will most likely be fans. So with only one season under my belt and after many theories bounce back from me and my roommate, I think I have a really strong prediction for what is actually going on behind the mysterious company Lumon and what the innie's purpose really is. Make sure to like and subscribe, and let's try and predict what Severance is really about. Okay, first before we get into my crazy conspiracy, I have a few disclaimers. 1, today I'm going to be going over a lot and pretty much all over the place, so just try and follow me. 2, I'm not going to be doing a summary or a recap, so if you haven't seen the show, well, I'm not sure why you're here because this is about to spoil everything so far. 3, this theory was created after watching Season 1, but I have seen up until Episode 3 of Season 2, so there will be some stuff from those episodes in here. And 4, lastly, we're going to be focusing on 3 main components of the show. The severing process, how it turns them into a new person basically, the effect it could have on the human mind, and what the true purpose behind it is. Secondly, just Kier Egan in general and his goal with this company. And then 3, the goats. I'm telling you, I think they are more important than we realize. Alright, let's get into it. So my theory formed after watching the first season, but the first couple of episodes that recently came out for Season 2 have given me a little more assurance in my beliefs. I believe that the MDR employees are experiments rather than workers. Experiments to create the ideal worker and possibly the perfect human. They want to rid humans of any negative mental blocks like sadness, grief, depression, and existential thoughts as a whole. The work they do, in my opinion, is a smokescreen to keep them active, possibly even testing them during their time down in the severed floor. But let's just start with the procedure itself. Like I had said before, the severing process practically turns them into a new person. It's been compared a lot by fans as a metaphor for mental health, something akin to dissociation, the idea of your ever-changing personality similar to code switching. It's even been said it's a metaphor for drug abuse. And we know there are a lot of themes about the existential nature of working for a living in general, and the mental toll work has on us humans. Throw in corporate greed in there, and you pretty much got the whole series in a nutshell. And we know the idea that companies can treat us like numbers. Humans are just robots in their eyes, or they rather just hire robots, are common phrases that you'll hear. And it's almost as if the severing process is turning them into robots. They are a blank slate that need to be taught and guided in a certain direction, but have the capacity to progress and develop further. And I'm sure you know where this is going, but it could very much be inspired by artificial intelligence. And once I started looking at the employees as their version of a robot worker, it got me thinking about those stories of AI robots talking to each other. There's the confirmed story of the Facebook AI bots that were talking to each other and created their own language. Then there's that one story that isn't fully confirmed, I think at Boston Dynamics, where 2 AI computers turned themselves on, started talking, and got to the point where they got existential and were asking questions like, who am I, what is death, and what is the meaning of life? Now, again, I'm going off my own ideas, opinions, and theories, but the very nature of AI is paradoxical in so many ways. If intelligence is inherently a quality of living things, the farther artificial intelligence becomes, the closer it gets to becoming human. I mean, if monkeys could speak with humans in English, Spanish, or French or something, they would be paying taxes. But that disparity is what keeps us higher on the food chain. Humans created AI, it did not create itself. And intelligence is a construct made by humans, so therefore, Wouldn't humans be above AI no matter what? Until AI became sentient and developed a consciousness of sorts? Is sentience not the ultimate form of intelligence? So we could look at the Severed as a hybrid between AI and humans. Biologically, they are people, but mentally, they are kinda like robots. They are a step in the process of AI development, and because they are biologically human, they have human-like instincts. It would be like if AI started to become sentient and developed original thought and emotions. So they have to treat the Severed as such, giving them incentives to continue working. Because if AI becomes so advanced, who's to say it would do what you told it to? There is that power dynamic if you can train the worker with positive and negative reinforcement. And we see this the most with the character of Dylan, a worker completely motivated by incentives, self-accomplishment, and positive reinforcement. But we aren't really here to talk about him because this theory lies within Mark S. and Irving. Also because we know the true nature of Heliar, and at this point I'm not sure if in Season 2 it's her severed self, but she also doesn't really apply to this theory. Alright, so all that AI stuff was still setting up my theory and giving context as to why I think it works. But whether or not it's true, it doesn't change the mystery of Mark S., our main character. So as we get through the first season, we spend the most time with Mark S. as we learn so much about his outside life. The reason he joined Lumon in the first place is because his wife Gemma died in a car crash, and he wants to have 8 hours a day where he doesn't think about her or know about this tragedy. It's his version of therapy. But as we watch his Audi, we see that Lumon bleeds into all aspects of his life as he is constantly being watched. Miss Cobell is even his neighbor. And the same most likely goes with the other employees as well. So I believe that Mark S. is their most important experiment as they try to see if they can remove a person's grief scientifically. Possibly even remove the ability to be sad or even artificially create the feeling of happiness in one's mind. There has always been such an emphasis on his character, and as we start Season 2, some of the superiors start referring to Cold Harbor and how close he is to completing it. I think Cold Harbor is the code name for said experiment. So going off of my theory, I think he was chosen because of his immense levels of grief from his wife's death. Now, as we find out in Season 2, his wife is down on the severed floor as well. This could be another experiment all in itself, as they could have tried to put a chip into an unconscious person, or a brain-dead person, or even a dead person, in the event that she actually did die in that car wreck. I mean, after Petey died, they act as if his consciousness is still inside the chips, so these chips could have an entire person's brain on them. But also, what if their death was faked by Lumon for this experiment? Either way, Mark S. was chosen. He is treated as so important within the company. He's given a leadership position, a lot of responsibility, and praised by his superiors when he does the right thing. I think they are doing this to incentivize his innie to stay and become more integrated within the company so they can continue their experiment. And we will get into this in a second, but if anyone should be treated like he is, it's Irving. But for whatever reason, they want Mark S. He is even given this level of focus on the outside as we see the constant monitoring of his Audi's life. And after the OTC incident, Mr. Milicic goes to convince him to stay at the company because the happiness he feels down there from being such a good worker can transfer itself into his Audi's brain. And if we are taking that at face value, not as a manipulation tactic, that's the theory right there. They are blatantly saying they can improve his mental health by working as a severed Lumon employee. Him having his wife down there in the form of Miss Cassie was a test to see if any of his Audi's brain is lingering in his innie's brain. And it isn't. Therefore, his grief is non-existent on the severed floor. Now the question is, can they do this permanently? So Dylan is one level where they just want to see if they can manipulate the human instinct and blind the severed into working without the existential nature of labor. And then Mark is an experiment on if they can remove these feelings altogether in the hopes to create the perfect worker, one who is void of any negative thoughts that could hinder their work. But Irving is where I think we get to the center of this near 200-year-old experiment. So all of this stems from Kier Egan, the creator of Lumon and the one they are serving. His mission statement when he started the company and the mantra that they follow is to make the world a better place for everyone. All of the superiors and all of the severed are working with the intention to serve him, make him proud, and carry out his purpose. And Irving is the only one who seems to truly believe this at MDR, yet he is treated the most poorly out of the four. They have convinced his innie of the greatness Kier is to fully commit to serving him and to becoming the perfect worker. All his innie knows is MDR, and he questions none of it. The only emotions he feels are tied to the company and the work that they do, but the second he feels something outside of this, they rip it away from him. After meeting Bert, a worker in a different department, he starts to develop feelings for him. It's his innie's first experience with human emotion and instinct from the outside, and once the superiors find this out, Bert is then magically up for retirement and leaves the building forever, ultimately killing off his innie. I believe they did this so they could test their most loyal employee. Instead of removing grief, they give him that grief, possibly to see if they can remove it afterwards or still convince him to serve the movement that gave him this grief. Like I said, Kier is their god, their cult leader. And in order to worship such a figure, there has to be complete faith in that person. Nothing is perfect, and no human or sentient being can be. They will do things that hurt you or negatively affect you. We see this with people questioning why suffering exists if God exists. Even through grief, sadness, tragedy, and depression, can you accept those feelings and focus on the positive? I think Lumon now in the modern world is a corporate entity whose greed is trying to create robotic workers to serve the monetary and power-driven goals of that company. But Kier Egan, the founder, he wanted to create something of a new religion, using the workers in the same way he would use his followers. By promising them a life with no sorrow, they would in turn follow him as their leader. And we see how impressionable Mark and Dylan become once they read Rickon's book, because there are no other teachings outside of Lumon they can follow. And it appeals enough to their basic human instincts that it feels familiar. That's why the company ends up pursuing his book instead of going against it. It's the same process of how they integrated the teachings of Kier into the workspace. The innies don't know any better, and the superiors want to keep it that way. But at the end of the day, they are still humans. And the more intelligent that they get, the more that they risk them learning too much. How can they turn them into sheep? Or should I say, goats? Okay, last thing before we get into my final thoughts. I know I'm going over a lot, but in general, this show is a lot. But we need to talk about the goats because I found some interesting things about them as I researched this video that I think could just add to this theory. I already had this theory in my mind before I first saw the goat department, I guess that's what we're calling it, but I knew I had to look something up because it can't be random. So if my theory is correct and they are experimenting on humans, I wanted to see what goats have been used for in experiments. Apparently, they have a similar heart to us in structure and in size, so we have tested them for cardiovascular conditions that we can have. Now, this could just add to the symbolism of the severed being tested on in general, but think about how it's the heart specifically. Symbolically, this could represent that they are testing the human heart, in the metaphorical sense. The heart represents the emotions, whether a broken heart, love, bravery, all that defiant jazz. And then I thought about how they are trying to make them followers of Kier, or sheep. And what's the difference between sheep and goats? Well, besides that they are different biological animals. If we are sticking to a religious theme with Kier being a godlike figure and possibly a cult leader, there are actually references to the difference in these animals in the Bible. The sheep were representative of God's followers, whereas the goats were the deniers. They were the ones that rejected Jesus Christ. And this right here is from dictionary.com because separate the sheep from the goats is an actual well-known phrase. Quote, this term refers to Jesus' prophecy in the New Testament, Matthew 25:32, that the sheep, that is the compassionate, will sit on God's right hand and find salvation, and the goats, the hard-hearted, will sit on the left and be sent to damnation. They are trying to turn the goats into sheep. Metaphorically, of course, but they are trying to make the severed into followers. From defiant beings into sheep. They want to rid humans of anything that can make them go against Lumon and Kier and turn them into something that they can easily manipulate. Whether it is with the intent to make autonomous workers or cult members, they are trying to make them Okay, I know I just went all over the place and kind of turned into a tin hat conspiracy theorist, but let's try and tie all of this together. No matter how advanced AI becomes, humans will always be around. Right now, there's 8 billion of us on Earth, and unless the robots get so advanced they wipe us all out, we will still be here. And anyone creating these advanced computers is still a human. So instead of making robots that could do so, why not turn humans into living robots? But because of instincts, sentience, consciousness, emotions, and thoughts, we could never truly live like that unless by choice or by force. Hence the conversations the show is having about the Audis choosing to do this procedure. But once something becomes intelligent enough, it will seek out more information. Ignorance is bliss and knowledge creates curiosity. These blank slates that they call the innies will start to question what they are doing here as they learn more. And they aren't computers, they are biologically human. They come with all the baggage that the human condition brings. I mean, we would work 15 hours a day based on incentives and kind of being forced into it by society if our brains didn't make us question the reasoning and the meaning behind why and how it affects our life. Existential thoughts and emotions are our only true block in this scenario, right? So let's test out a grief-stricken human, a content human, and let's make one of the innies suffer the feelings of grief. Let's slowly introduce them to these negative and positive thoughts and emotions so we can see how they're created and how they're destroyed. If they can find out how something works, they can find out how to stop it. If they can only make them feel happy feelings and take away all of their pain, in turn they would serve the thing that made them that way. They wouldn't question us, they wouldn't question the meaning, they wouldn't question life. They would serve it with a smile on their face and be happy to do so. The thoughts that make us defy authority, greed, and the menial nature of work would be erased. They would become the perfect worker. Oh yeah, and then the numbers. I almost forgot about that.
The numbers, basically. What do they mean?
If we are going to ask what the purpose behind Lumon is and what they are really doing, we gotta talk about the actual task that they are completing, sorting the numbers. So I believe that they don't actually go towards anything. It's just a menial task but also a test. They are told to sort the numbers based on feeling and that they are correlated with fear and comfort. Whichever numbers elicit a negative reaction, quote-unquote scary numbers, they are told to sort these out from the rest. I think they are just trying to see how fear works in the innies' brains. It's just a test to see how they identify negative emotion. And they are probably scanning their brainwaves the same way they scan them in the break room when they are being punished. It's not work that they are doing, they are just experimenting on them. The numbers are quite literally data just about the innies' brains. And if you're wondering how optics and design works into this, the department ran by Christopher Walken, honestly I haven't fully fleshed that one out yet. I think maybe they are some of the only severed actually doing work for the company, but it's just an attempt to further experiment on the innies. They mess with those paintings, creating horrific imagery, they create a lot of imagery that they see in the offices, and I think it's all just to make the innies feel certain emotions that they want them to feel. But I'm sure they'll also explain that at some point. And when it comes to Petey and the girl that's helping out Mark S on the outside, I think those are just failed experiments. But yeah, I went on way longer than I wanted to, but that's kinda what I always do here. Mark S, the Cold Harbor experiment, they're using him as a test to see if they can get rid of someone's grief. They've been spying on him since before and trying to manipulate his brain. And that's my prediction. Lumon is experimenting on humans to mold them into the perfect sheep workers for a larger conspiracy. To take over the world, maybe, but to serve their daddy Kier, definitely. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. What's your theory on the truth behind Severance? And of course, feel free to question my crazy theory because I'd love to discuss this with some diehard fans. And yeah, maybe this made sense, maybe it didn't, but I'll see y'all later.